But it was not on WebEx. It was on page Byzantium, Egypt, Nubia, and Ethiopia. Could you write it on Byzantium? Byzantium, Egypt, Nubia, and Ethiopia. But I have to go. Okay, so please, because I'm a person who.
Yeah.
No, because there is changed link, and I wrote it on the page Byzantium, Egypt, Nubia, and Ethiopia. Now I don't know how to do it.
Shall we wait 5 minutes until
you can
arranged
start.
it?
You can start, and yeah. I will go to the office and I will do it. And please start, and I will come in 5 minutes. Okay?
As you want.
Okay? Is it okay? Because maybe people are waiting for proper link.
Yeah, that's why I said we can wait maybe some minutes until everything is arranged.
Okay, so just start to speak with students. General questions about Ethiopia, and I will
that's a good idea because
minutes,
the main lecture we should start all together. I think.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Very good. So I now told you about my own background, my basic starting point, which is this interaction between culture and history, but always with the idea behind that I'm interested in understanding society. And already before I mentioned, but I want to make it very clear, there is very often, let me call it the narratives of the elites. The narratives of the elites are very important to be studied, but they do not represent a society. They say they represent a society. Yeah, you see the difference. It's very important. Your grandmother may represent the society, not the elites telling. So this is also a typical starting point for anthropological research. Anthropological research is very interested in how people organize themselves in whatever way. In some cases, you have leading narratives which are very different from the real life of the people. That's not surprising. It's rather normal that it is like that. But what is also rather normal, that the people identify with the leading narratives, with the leading discourses, and are blinded towards the fact that their life is totally different from what they tell about their life. So this now in very general terms, but what is, for example, a very typical case within Ethiopia, if we speak about a history of politics or look at specific political discourses, in Ethiopia, what you see is that there's a very strong narrative of we have always been one, we have always been united. This is a narrative you find especially in the center of Ethiopia. Later, I will tell you a little bit more about Ethiopia. But there's this idea of some people within the country, we have always been united. Then you check, you see that there is village communities behind the mountains. They speak another language. You check their culture. They have a totally different culture from even the people in the next valley. So what does it mean we have always been united? Then you go to that valley or to that village and ask them, I come now from the central areas of Ethiopia. Tell me about your history. Yes, we have always been occupied by armies coming from there. But they said you were always unified and you are all one. Yes, that's the ones who are sending the armies are telling you. Now, this is just a drastic example, but that's totally typical for any country and any society. Within societies, you have people believing the general discourse, sometimes also happily identifying with it, because the word unity sounds good, doesn't it? It's very nice. Why should we not be unified? Why should we fight? So we are in favor of unity. We are in favor of love. We are in favor of unifying everyone. But if it means that you are sending armies, there may be a problem with the concept. And that's what we are doing as, for example, in political anthropology. In political anthropology, we try to understand how societies organize themselves on the ground, maybe in contrast with the dominant political narratives or historical narratives. And historical narratives, political narratives are very often close with each other. Another example from personal life. I hope you're not shocked. In Poland, like in Ethiopia, like in Germany, like in other Christian countries or countries of Christian tradition, we believe, at least that's the narrative, we believe in monogamy. We believe that one woman should marry one man and the other way around. Now, if we look into Christian narrative, this is very much the rule. This is the dominant idea. So marriage means this. And not only marriage, but it's the basic rule for life organization. It is going so far that in many societies who are marked by this tradition, the idea is that this is the natural setting, which is even in our biology. Even biological anthropological researchers try to prove that many times. Now let's look at Ethiopia. As an ancient Christian country, what are they saying and what are they doing? I tell you the story of one of my students. His task was, in his MA, to document traditional marriage practices. That was the topic. So it's fine. Ethiopia is an ancient, the Ethiopian highlands, I have to say, is an ancient Christian country. Of course, this Christian teaching was about marriage under God, under the church. So a marriage idea which was linking a man and a woman strongly for the whole life. If you ask Ethiopians about their tradition, they will say, yes, that's the tradition. We are monogamous. One man has to marry one wife, different from the Muslims, where one man marries maybe several wives. And different from some savage people, where everyone is sleeping with everyone. That's what they say. So the narrative is also a narrative of creating boundaries. So there's the boundary to those who are savage, which means close to animals. We are not animals. That's why we are not sleeping everyone with everyone. That's the discourse. And we are not Muslims. We are not pagan. We are not enemies of God. That's why there's only one woman and one man who marry. So that's the discourse. Now, this is a typical example about discourses. So my student was submitting his first chapter in which he described all these traditions with Ethiopian sayings, poems about how to be a God-following Christian within the field of marriage. Then I told him, okay, continue. Just document everything what people are saying, but don't forget what people are saying may be different from what they are doing. As a researcher, you are not supposed to copy just the leading discourse. Your task is, and that's an marriage, he will get so many women. What? So I told you, the Ethiopian narrative is about monogamy. One man, one woman marrying each other, and that's it the entire life. That's the narrative. And then I told him, okay, you have a song where the man is praised by his friends during the marriage feast itself that he's so strong that he will get many women. So what does it mean? Oh, no, this is not our culture. And I said, wait, you just documented the songs which are practiced in your culture. How can you say this is not our culture? Oh, no. We are monogamous. I said, look at that song. Are you monogamous? I am monogamous. Okay, check your father and grandfather. Yes, they had 4 women. And then I said, look, that's your duty as a researcher. Do not follow simply the official discourse. Look at the practice. Then how people communicate about the practice. And this practice may be in a strong contradiction with what is told. So this is now basically a summary of my work.
Okay, thank you very much for this lovely introduction. Now I sent new link on YouTube, so it will be streamed on YouTube. I put also because Jacopo Nishi asked me. Do you know Jacopo?
No.
Jacopo
Nishi,
of course, yes,
sure.
He's
I know
specialist
yes,
in,
sure.
in manuscripts.
Yeah,
yes,
very
so,
good. Of course,
yes,
I know.
So he was interested.
Excellent.
If you could be so kind and could I ask some of you maybe to open a little bit window? Do you mind or not?
As you want.
Because
it's fine. I have this. So
when I went to the room, it was a little bit hot, So
yeah,
maybe
that's fine.
So let us Let us start the lecture entitled The Power of Icons and Their Role in the Creation of Communality,
yes.
in Ethiopia.
And I entered the subtitle based on the announcement of focus on this one aspect of the role of icons within a community. And even more precisely, the role of icons in the creation of communality. What I understand under communality. Communality, you can use also other terms. I would not focus too much on one very specific term, but I would rather insist on the importance of the main idea. Communality is the idea that societies very often, not all societies, but more or less every society has it, create a feeling of togetherness, a feeling of being member of a larger group, a member of a community. So communality expresses the idea of a process of creation of community through different means of communication and which is based on shared values. And on shared values in the sense of transmission of values through different means of communication, like speaking, singing, painting, poetry, and chatter. Grandmothers who sit together prepare some food for the men. I have to mention this is a quite patriarchal traditional society, so the mothers are sitting together and preparing the food or the coffee, and they sit together and chat. So while they are chatting, they speak about others and their bad behavior, or the beauty of someone, or the good behavior of someone. That's very important and should never be underestimated as one of the key tools for creating communality. Because while chatting about each other, people transfer views and values. And views are always expressions not, you may think so, but not of a personal position. It's only one aspect, but of you having designed your way of thinking in combination with the society and in contrast with the society and in communication with the society. So your personal view is not a personal view. Your personal view is a result of an interaction with others. In this sense, you create a set of values and a set of views of something which is dependent on the society within which you are living. This creates always some diversity, but the diversity is to be seen in a set of communication where all of them are produced only in a specific cultural set of words, of arts, of values. So you are moving within a framework of thinking and a framework of communication. And arts is very important for that. Here you see one icon, which is from a museum collection. So this is my starting point. In the center, you see Saint Mary. And on the right and left, you see the archangels, Michael and Gabriel. This is a very typical setting in Ethiopian art. You know very well, as you are studying art history, you know very well that the setting of Saint Mary in the center, linked with archangels Gabriel and Michael, is quite a basic pattern in a Christian art history. So I don't need to go into details here. Just I mention one thing which is important and which is very important for the understanding of community. The mother, the idea of mother as the one who is caring for the child. So the idea of caring is in the center. The idea of protection and of protective love, this is in the center. So this, of course, transports a very basic value of society. I mentioned before that Ethiopian society has this patriarchal structure. On the other hand, the entire patriarchal structure is based on the idea of the central role of women. So we should not exaggerate this idea of separation between men and women in the sense of a very strong, let's say, hierarchical set of power distribution, because St. Mary is in the center of most discourses of the critical view of the elements of an, let me call it ideological painting. And icons are ideological paintings also in the neutral sense, because they are producing and protecting and communicating an ideology, a set of thoughts, simply. So if we look at the sword, it's an instrument of war. It's an instrument of killing. It's an instrument of hurting. But now let's come back to the view of the society. That's not what is said.
May I comment
Yes?
something?
Yes?
If you don't mind. First of all, I would like to ask you from which century is this icon?
This is, I don't remember very well, I have to check, but it is, according to my memory, 16th century or slightly earlier, maybe 15th century, but around that time. But I will explain something about the background.
Now, I'm interested in such a subject because you said that these archangels are holding swords because this is a symbol of war, but I have no time to develop it, but in the nativity scene from Dongola and I think from two churches, on the side of the scene of nativity, there are dancing warriors with swords.
Absolutely.
And I was looking for the tradition, according to my interpretation. It can be very long tradition connected with the birth of Zeus. You know, when his mother sent him to Crete, and Curetae were dancing and with swords and hitting their shields just to protect this child, because Zeus was crying, so they wanted, to cover the sound. So maybe this long tradition also is connected with protecting child,
Now that's my point. You interrupted exactly in that moment, because I first wanted to give an interpretation of what a sword means from outside. Yeah, I said this is an outside view. But we should never say the sword in Ethiopian tradition is a symbol of war. It is not. Yeah, it is very clearly not. You see, that's what you're doing in cultural research. You go outside an ideological setting, you go inside the ideological setting. So if I suggest you an analysis of the role of sword, yes, it is linked with killing, hurting, injury, and so on. But we have to go back from that view. I just want you to have heard that, but that's an outside view, to be very clear. You have to go back into the narratives of the society, and everything changes. This is not a symbol of war within the society. It's a symbol of protection. And exactly as Dr. Waptash, I'm sorry, Dr. Waptash has just said, here you have the setting with the central role of St. Mary giving care and protection, and another level of protection on the right and the left. So the entire thing is a closed setting of protection with that we find it in manuscripts that in the area of Israel there were ancient icons which were produced in ancient times and were showing the saints as they were in this time, showing not in the sense of similarity. That's a modern concept. We should not think in that terms, but showing in the sense of a representation of their power and of their role within the saintly world. So there was the idea that these icons are close to the saintly traditions, and who, according to this perspective, who has inherited icon traditions? It were the Mediterranean populations. So we cannot say that it were the Europeans, because Europe is a modern concept. That's not the point here. But those who are living at the Mediterranean evidently live in the surroundings of Israel, of ancient Israel. And this is precisely the people who were close to the original nativity and so on, the stories of the Bible. So there was the idea that this ancient heritage, this ancient Christian heritage, has to be brought to Ethiopia in order to assure that Ethiopia is close to the saints. Ethiopia being a country having converted to Christianity in the 4th century, there was a very strong demand for Christian narratives hagiographies, and icons. And that's the background why already in the high medieval age, there was a sort of import of artists from Italy and other areas of the Mediterranean into Ethiopia. We have some sources which even mention some of these migrant workers. Some of them were forcefully married within Ethiopia so that they never go back again. And in some cases, we find the original paintings and monasteries, and we find icon paintings, and we find some of these paintings also in form of copies. So they had students, they were teaching iconography to their students. Now this is just to shortly come back to the general setting. I make it very short. You see, Ethiopia is today, in our today's perspective, seen as simply an African country. It is in northeastern Africa, so from a point of view of continent, it is evident, it's correct. But there is some sort of potential misunderstanding if we set Ethiopia simply into the framework of what we imagine under the word Africa. You see that Ethiopia is marked by the presence of the Indian Ocean, which is here, and the Red Sea, which is connecting this region through ancient trade routes, ancient shipping routes to the Mediterranean, to the Eastern Mediterranean, via the Indian Ocean to the Indian sphere, to the Indian Ocean sphere. So naturally, being placed at the big international routes, sea routes, Ethiopia is a crossroad of cultures and is a place where cultures from ancient times, interpretation of Saint Mary. But there is so many other cases. And here I show you the next example, which is one of many possible aspects of creating communality in the sense of a common fantasy, of a common, let's say, way of expression of values, of fears, of suffering, of hope. Here you have a typical wall painting, 20th century wall painting, but dependent on earlier iconographic traditions in one church. And here you have a scene at an Orthodox church of women moving around in a circle. I don't know if you see what happens. I will explain it to you. If you don't see it now, just pay attention. Here you see Jesus in a classical position. I will explain you that painting a little bit later, but you have made the scene so interesting. Do you see what she is doing? Do you see what they are doing? You may not see it very well, but you see that they are moving in a circle. You see that she has something in her hand. In fact, she has an instrument of flagellation. She's hitting herself. She's the leading nun torturing herself. This is rather a sort of symbolic torture. Yes. So she is in this movement of hitting herself, hitting her body. We have some reports that in times of crisis, it can go very far. They may dance a long time, crying to God, supplying the mercy of God in times of danger. And the hitting, this flagellation, may go very far as destroying the clothes and leading you to bleed. There's another example in Ethiopian tradition. It is outdated now. You don't have it anymore, but it's just to show you how far it can go. In the saintly tradition of Ethiopia, you have one kind of belt, which is called the makad. And the makad is a belt with nails inside. So you have the nails inside, and to make you suffer more, you may tighten the belt more. So the nails go into your flesh. So this is just to show you the contrast that while you are in the world, you're subject of suffering, but you have to accept the suffering, and the suffering itself is used again as an instrument to accept the idea that the world is suffering, and you have to free yourself from your dependency on the world in order to get closer to God. So you actively increase your suffering in order to supply to God and to ask for the mercy of God to bring you back the peace which you need on earth. So it's an interaction of rejection of the worldly life in order to come closer to God. And what is that scene? This is a few years ago. There was a story, there was a prophecy in the Tigrayan population that in short time there will be drought with famine and war. So which we have now. We have drought, famine, war just now. So the women were assembling during the feast of the saints of that church. And here you see this central role of saints. During the feast of saints, the people are gathering, and here this nun, this leading nun, was starting to flagellate a specialist who had accompanied a British army into Ethiopia. I don't tell you the political background. It's a complex setting, but in that time the emperor of Ethiopia was in conflict with the British. So the British had sent an army of intervention. So in the army of intervention, there was a specialist from the British Museum who was supposed to go there to loot important icons and manuscripts and other objects from the Ethiopian tradition. It was already known Ethiopia is a very important repository of Orthodox Christian heritage. So he found that icon and decided not to tell the British Museum what he found, and he stole it from the loot. He was the looter, the official looter of the British government, and he looted from the loot of the British government and was hiding it for himself. So when the later emperor of Ethiopia was writing a letter to the Ethiopian government, I need that icon. I will explain you why the emperor needs that icon. I need that icon. Jesus is from the house of David, as you know. So this is important in the self-definition of the Ethiopian monarchy. There's this genealogical link with the biblical figures. So to come back to the icon, there was already closeness, a systematic closeness, as I said, between the emperor and Jesus. But what was needed was also the presence of Jesus. And here, this is a perfect example with which I can explain you the presence of God, the presence of the saintly sphere in this world through icons. Why did the emperor need that icon? It was because he was going to war from time to time. He had to fight wars against Muslim neighbors. In some cases, there was a difficult relationship which was moderated through diplomats with neighboring populations. Sometimes there were payments of tributes by neighboring kingdoms or neighboring Muslim dynasties. But in some cases, so there was some sort of precarious stability, but in some cases, the stability collapsed and they entered into the war. What are you doing if you're a war leader? You say that God is on your side. So how to convince people that God is on your side? You show God. So the Son of God, Jesus Christos in the Ethiopian tradition, is of course, we know the Trinitarian concept, is of course not only the Son of God, but one of the emanations of God. So there is a very complex theological debate behind that. So the Ethiopians are Miaphysites, which believe in the very strong identity of all three emanations of God. So Jesus himself, being presented by an icon, was not only present in the sense of an image, but he was present himself. So when the emperor went to war, you can now imagine what he did probably. He took the icon and was moving on his horse in front of the army with this icon. That's why this icon is so important. And that's why when the British had stolen it, and the museum collaborator had stolen it from the loot, the emperor needed that icon. That was the time when in the 1870s, the new emperor of Ethiopia was in conflict with the Muslim armies of Egypt. Egypt was an imperialist state. So he needed to have this icon in order to win against the Egyptian armies who were invading Ethiopia in that time. It was of greatest political importance. So you already understood the role of icons in the sense of creating presence of the saintly sphere. I said now creating presence, but what's maybe the better terminology is evoking presence. So evoking presence, I want to insist, is a concept which has to be taken quite literally. This is not just a representation of Jesus, in this case, Jesus Christus. This is not just a pious work of art. Basically, you can even say it's not a work of art. It's a very high-level saintly object, which is much more than the beauty appearance, the colors, or the shape of the face. It is an object which creates presence, which evokes presence of the saintly sphere. So through the icon, and this is true with any icons in the iconographical traditions, in the visual traditions of the Ethiopian churches, any icon evokes the immediate presence of the saintly sphere, and very concretely, in this case, the presence of Jesus Christus. So now you understand also the central role of Qedisti Mariam. That's how she is called in Ethiopia. Qedisti Mariam, Saint Mary, as a central figure in Ethiopian church paintings, as the one who's creating, offering protection, is important for the self-definition of the society, of the role of women, of the identity of the society, with the sphere of care and love, which again is the community itself. However, you see the angels, in this case, not so warrior-like, but with another saint, Saint George, Qudus Georgis in the Ethiopian tradition, killing the dragon, which is a manuscript which I found in the central church of the Ethiopian church tradition, the most important church, Aksum Tzion. So the eternal fight against the evil, you find it repeatedly in Ethiopian iconography. The next example, which is a variation of this theme, and I believe a very important one, what you usually see is saintly figures fighting against dragons, snakes, but in some cases even the devil himself. Usually, you have the saintly sphere, or the sphere of those who are believers, represented in a way that you see the faces with two eyes, and the two eyes are facing you, while the sphere of the evil,
the fire garments, the bad characters are in profile. So
yeah,
I think that it is also Nubian tradition as well.
I think that's very important, and you see that here you have also a local tradition of understanding of the world and the interaction between the sphere of the evil and the saintly sphere. So you have a very basic conflict between these two spheres, but the saintly world, if you are pious, if you are directing your life towards the saintly world, to the saintly sphere, not the world is always just us here, the saintly sphere, then you can be protected. In very rare cases, you have the devil facing you with two eyes. This is an example. This is very rare. And you see here the 12, difficult to say who it is, can be the apostles, but I would rather interpret them as a sort of the community. So here we have a very typical Ethiopian tradition that whenever you come together, you eat together. That's not the setting of icons in Ethiopia. The setting of icons in Ethiopia is rather what you see here. You have church service, you have the covered, the walls of the church covered by manifold versions of icons. You have Saint Mary, you have the angels protecting the inner entrance of the church. You have the sphere of the women, and another part of the church, the area of the men. They are sitting in different parts, but are unified through the same room, through the presence in the same room, and the icons are everywhere. So through the presence of these icons in this room of the church, in the room of the service, there is this presence of the saintly sphere is evoked again through the presence of the people who are assembling under this sphere. It's worth looking at some minor aspects about organization of community. This is not only preserving something ideal, the idea of care, protection, unity. It also, this is used for healing and for protection against evil, against even the evil sphere, which I have described before. You also have these rituals, which I already mentioned, the rituals of flagellation, of imploring to God. Of course, where do you use, which space do you use for these rituals? It's the sphere of the church. That's also a sphere where you negotiate about problems, where you try to get traditional knowledge. So you will consult, it's a consulting sphere. You will consult the elders of the village to give you advice, for example, about marriage. You may go to the priest who give you teaching of the how to live your life. There's even some interesting advice from ancient wisdom, which may not be very church-like. If we have time, probably not. I can answer you also questions on that. Almost the last point, this sphere of the saintly space is, of course, also to be seen in relations to political conflicts. So political conflicts are, you have seen the example of the icon of Jesus himself. These conflicts are very often defined through the pattern of the fight of the pious against the evil invaders. So you have in church paintings, in church manuscripts, very often the stories of political leaders entered into the church art. Here you have a political leader, Ras Alula, who was the one who was fighting against foreign invaders. I mentioned the Egyptian army of the 1870s before. He led huge battles against the Egyptian army. There's also another side of the same, because these churches are a very important factor in the organization of the society, including into the possibility of creating resistance against invading forces within times of conflict. That's precisely the reason why in times of war, and the last 2 years there was war in the northern Ethiopia, why modern armies attack these churches. Because these churches have a central function in creating unity in the sense of commonly understood values and helping in the self-organization of society. So what do you attack? If you want to undermine the unity of such a society, you attack the icons. You attack the sphere of icons, which means you attack the saintly sphere, and in this sense, you attack the community itself. And to come to the conclusion, there's a typical modern European misunderstanding about art, seeing all this as objects of art, putting them in museums, and we have very interesting ancient times. So like this, the society, through the churches as depositories of cultural knowledge, are also linking themselves up with 1,000, 2,000 years old heritage, in this case, a Muslim inscription found in the church, which shows the interaction between ancient populations, which is in this case about 1,000 years old, and above that an Aksumite inscription also from pre-Christian times, which is from the period of when Aksum became Christian. So the churches are those places where you preserve even the historical memory of your society within the saintly sphere, even if your society was far away from today's Christianity. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this clear presentation and full of meaning and the modern attitude. By the way, I have the same impression, about the museum, although I spent 17 years in
Yes,
museum
I know.
working. So I would like to ask if there are any questions. Yes, Ms. Bigawa.
Yes, about the 10th slide, there was the picture of the blue devil in chains
Yes.
and 12 figures, and it's like it's the representation of community.
Yes.
I know it is common
Yes,
in the culture, but
yes.
is it also common in like icons? Like by the number of 12, I would obviously expect the 12 apostles.
Yes.
But you said it's more, it represents more of a community, and is it often that it's shown in?
Something. There were also 12 troops in the Old Testament, and if you remember the image from Dura Europos, there are also such red lines between tents and this 12. So maybe this is reversed, a negative picture of this society through these 12 troops, but in the negative sense. So maybe there is such connections. Yes.
We need to do the research. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Are there any more questions? I think that we should check the chat, but I don't know how to do it.
We
Do
need
you
the
know
technician.
how to?
I
Does
don't
somebody
see it.
know
I don't see it.
how to see the chat? Because
Yeah, there may be.
Mhm.
Yeah, you need to click on the browser next
Where?
to the PowerPoint icon.
Maybe you
Well,
come because you seem to know, and I think that's quicker if you can.
For me, also, this gesture is very interesting because,
Yeah.
as you saw in Faras,
Yeah.
a lot of figures. So, do you think that it is praying gesture? This
Wonderful. I mean, in this case, in this specific icon, and this icon has, is at the beginning of a strong Ethiopian tradition where it is really this gesture of blessing of the world. But maybe in earlier cases, we do have this gesture of praying. But in this specific case, I don't see that.
I think that Jacopo wrote that if you
Shaky.
say something, you can say something to Jacopo now, because I think that when you are moving, the voice was
Of course.
escaping. So
Yes.
you can write something to Jacopo.
Yeah, but there's no
because
question. It was just a
he
remark.
wrote,
Now it's working.
now, so you can write thank you for your attendance or something
Yeah.
like this, because I think that if you want to be heard well, you have to stick to this, computer.
Yes.
Almost. So yes,
I
please.
also have a question about the Jesus with this praying gesture. He doesn't have a
Halo?
Yeah.
Ah, yes.
Why?
This is quite an exception. There is some research on it. This is quite a rare depiction of Jesus. There is a halo. But
Radiating.
you see it. It's a rare version. Yeah. You see the sun, the rays of light around his head in the main icon, and you see here interpretation. And this is now really interesting. In the Ethiopian iconic tradition, you have a process of copying and of reinterpretation. And the halo, which is in the original icon, had been reinterpreted as a crown. And the painter of this one has not seen this icon. The painter of this one has seen other copies, which were copies of copies. So you have a very long chain of copies with reinterpretations. So the original halo has changed into the crown. And here you see, of course, the thorns. You see still some sort of topic. She has an absolutely amazing collection of Ethiopian art.
Yes. So we can write an email to her. Okay, so because I think that students are going for
Yes.
or have you got some more questions? If not, I have plenty of questions to you, but we can discuss in the other room when is my duty. So we can go to the other room, and thank you very much for attention, and thank you very much once more, Professor. And thank you also our colleague that you picked up, Professor from Hera hotel, there were any problems or not?
Not at all.
Okay.
It was so perfect.
Thank
And
you.
he was not only driving, he was even ready to chat. So I was very happy.
And I know that you are very busy because yesterday
Yes.
I spoke with Hannah and she said, "Oh, we had meeting on Friday."
Yes. No, I will meet her now after this.
At
After
what
we
time?
finish.
At what time?
We said when I'm ready.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, thank you very much, and thank you for coming here, especially for our students. And this is work by Paulina. Now this is correct. To jest już poprawione.
Szymon?
Dobrze.
Shimon,
Czyli my tam jeszcze.
can I use you as taxi driver after that?
No, I will pick you up
You
if
will.
you like.
Okay.
Yes, I don't like
So
to
you are
bother.
free.
Okay. Yes.
Of course.
Ja tak. Moment, zróbmy zdjęcia, poczekajcie sekundę, bo wszyscy zróbmy zdjęcie sobie z profesorem. Ktoś nam chce zrobić zdjęcie? Potem, dobra, moment, tak gdzie jest teraz. Ale chodźcie sobie zrobimy z profesorem. Gdzie jest mój telefon teraz?
So, see you.
Tak. Dobra, to może słuchajcie, zrobimy sobie zdjęcie tutaj z profesorem. Będziemy mieć też jako dokumentację. To jedna osoba nam może zrobić, no bo tak to się nie ten, chyba że kogoś z korytarza poprosimy. Okay, so we will take the photo.
Ah,
Okay.
community.
Dobra, to ja sobie marynarkę założę też, żeby już tak elegancko. O, pan przyszedł. Dobrze, to bardzo dobrze. Może pan na zdjęcie sobie tu staniemy z profesorem. Not only community in Ethiopia, but also in Poland. Ja badana tutaj tak jakoś nastawić. To takie COVID plasty. Okay, just a second. Here jeszcze. Wyszło? Muszę powiedzieć, zamówię pan zdjęcie robić, byśmy wiedzieli, kiedyś mamy Super, bardzo panu dziękuję. No, mamy tutaj, ja wam wyślę, and I will send the professor. Thank you very much.
Dziękuję.
Dziękuję bardzo. Dziękujemy. Dziękuję bardzo panu. A jakby pan jakiś kontakt chciał, to pana profesora, to macie kontakt. Yes, it was, pan can go for a while to our room. We can discuss, and I would like to invite you for lunch, and then.
Yes, you are right, because I'm hungry. On the other hand, let us chat with Hannah. I don't think she is waiting for lunch. I don't think so.
But
just to be sure.
Okay, so I will. Would you like to call her or? I will